This is Chris McKaylee, and this is how to read a constitutional amendment in the California Legislature. There are three types of legislative measures: bills, which of course create statutes; resolutions, which are generally used to express the intent or a statement by the legislature; and then a constitutional amendment. Now, the people can place a constitutional amendment on the ballot by way of an initiative. The legislature can as well. They have to pass either an SCA, a Senate Constitutional Amendment, or an ACA, an Assembly Constitutional Amendment. They require passage by both houses by a two-thirds vote, and there's no action by the governor. So when both houses pass it by at least a two-thirds vote, then it goes to the voters. Of course, the voters have the ultimate say whether or not to add a new section to the Constitution, amend an existing one, or repeal an existing one. So this is what it looks like. This is Assembly Constitutional Amendment number 5. So ACA, so a Senate one would say Senate Constitutional Amendment and the number. It's obviously introduced here by Assembly Member Lowe, and then he has principal co-authors, first the Assembly ones, then the Senate ones, then co-authors, first the Senate Assembly ones, the House of Origin, and then the Assembly ones. Of course, just like a bill, it has a date of introduction, February 14th, 2023. Similar to a bill, it has a title, but the language is different. A title of a bill says an act to add, amend, repeal, or some combination. Then it gives the code section or sections, the code, one of the 29 codes. Then it goes to the relating clause relating to taxation or education, transportation. With a constitutional amendment, it's a resolution. So once it's adopted by the two houses by a two-thirds vote, it's given a resolution chapter number. So not a bill number, but a resolution chapter, because basically what the legislature is doing, it is resolving to place a measure before the statewide electorate. So it says, and every constitutional amendment, ACA or SCA, always begins its title with a resolution to propose to the people of the state of California an amendment to the Constitution of the state. And in this instance, it is repealing and then adding Section 7.5 of Article 1 thereof. So it actually has the section. There are almost 30 articles, about 370 sections, and I think roughly 32 articles in the California Constitution. And then it's got the relating clause relating to rights. Then, just like a bill, it has a legislative council's digest. The attorneys at the Office of Legislative Counsel, of course, draft this digest based upon what is existing law and what this measure, this constitutional amendment that's being proposed, would do. Note that instead of saying existing law provides the following, like we see in a bill, it says the California Constitution provides. Now that follows, of course, the subject line, just like in a bill. It has the measure, ACA 5, the author, Lowe, as amended, and then Lowe, and then what is the subject. Just like a bill, after the number, it would say as introduced, if this were the introduced version, but of course, this is the first amended version, right? The amendment date is up top, the most recent at the very top. And then, so it says as amended, then the author, and then the subject, and the subject here is marriage equality. Remember, in the title, the relating clause, broader than the subject, just like in a bill. So then the existing law statement is the Constitution provides, and then instead of saying this bill would, it's not a bill, right? It's a measure. This measure would repeal this unenforceable constitutional provision and would instead provide the right to marry as a fundamental right as specified. So instead of saying this bill would, it says this measure would. And then guess what? We have the 4 digest keys again. With a constitutional amendment, it's easy. It's only one vote threshold, 2/3 of both houses. So vote 2/3. Does it contain an appropriation? Does it have to be re-referred to the fiscal committee? Does it create a state mandated local program? So same 4 digest keys. Next comes the actual text. Now, most constitutional amendments have one or more whereas clauses. This one has three whereas clauses. And then the constitutional amendment always ends before the actual language with the resolve clause. Resolved by the assembly. It lists the assembly first because remember this is an ACA. The Senate concurring, so both houses have to agree. So after it goes through the assembly, the Senate has to concur by a 2/3 vote. That the legislature of the state of California at its 2023-24 regular session commencing on the actual day, which was December 5th, 2022, 2/3 of the membership of each house concurring, that's the vote threshold, hereby proposes to the people of the state of California that the Constitution of the state be amended as follows. If it were an SCA, it would say resolved by the Senate, the assembly concurring. And then the only other thing that changes is the regular session dates and which day did they start. Otherwise, the rest of that resolve clause remains the same. And then we get into the language. Now, if there's the first provision, instead of saying section 1 of the bill, they call it first and then second. So first, that section 7.5 of Article 1 thereof is repealed. So that's the action line in the first section. In the second section, it's second. That section 7.5 is added to Article 1 thereof, and then there's the actual language. Two subdivisions A and B, and then two subparagraphs under B, 1 and 2, and that's the new section 7.5 that would be added to Article 1 by ACA 5 if the voters adopt it by majority vote. So those are the provisions of a California constitutional amendment and how you read through those provisions of a proposed constitutional amendment here in the California legislature. I hope that was helpful.